There had been a slow build-up over many months, almost like clouds gathering before a storm. Former President Donald Trump found himself facing several court cases, investigations and legal challenges that did not arrive all at once, but rather one after another, each adding new pressure and attention. These cases involved different subjects and were being handled in different courts, by different lawyers and judges, yet together, they created a strong sense that his legal situation was becoming more complicated as time passed. News commentators often spoke about these developments every day, and for many people, it felt like the legal world and the political world were now closely tied together. For Trump, this was not entirely new. Throughout his business career and political life, he had been involved in legal disputes before. He was someone used to being in the public eye, used to answering challenges and used to defending himself strongly. However, this situation was different. These were not small disagreements or simple business cases. These were large and serious matters, and the attention around them was enormous. Because he had once been President of the United States, every document, every decision, every statement made in court could quickly become a major headline. Reporters followed every step, both inside the courtroom and outside, capturing images, interviews, and reactions. His supporters remained loyal to him. They believed that the cases were being used as a way to damage his public image and prevent him from holding political power again. Many supporters spoke openly on social media and in interviews, saying they viewed the situation as unfair and politically motivated. They often repeated Trump's own statements that he was being treated differently because of his influence and because of his strong presence in national politics. To them, he was still a leader who represented their views, and they felt protective of him. On the other side, his critics felt differently. They believed that the legal system was finally catching up to actions and decisions they thought should have been examined long ago. These critics did not focus on politics when they spoke about the cases. Instead, they talked about accountability, consistency, and the idea that the law should apply to every person in the same way, no matter how much money or influence they have. They saw these cases not as political attacks, but as legal processes that should continue fully and fairly. Because of these opposing views, the entire situation became more than just courtroom proceedings. It became a national conversation. Every time a hearing date approached, news networks prepared special coverage. Journalists studied legal documents, analysts appeared on television to explain what could happen next, and newspapers printed long articles describing the details. Whether someone supported Trump or not, it became almost impossible to avoid hearing about the latest legal development. The schedule of legal events also added to the sense of pressure. Some hearings were scheduled close to each other. Some were postponed, then rescheduled, and then shifted again. It sometimes felt like there was always another important date approaching. Trump and his legal team had to prepare carefully. Each case required time, strategy, research, and attention. Lawyers examined thousands of pages of documents, statements, and records. They prepared arguments that they hoped would persuade judges. They discussed the order of witnesses and the meaning of legal terms. It was a complex and ongoing effort. Meanwhile, Trump continued to speak to the public. Whether he was at a rally, an interview, or posting online, he addressed the legal cases directly. He spoke firmly about his belief that the cases were unfair. He said that he would continue to defend himself, and that he was confident in the final outcome. His tone was determined and strong. For his supporters, this gave them energy and reassurance. They admired his continued confidence even under pressure. However, the pressure did exist even if he did not speak about it personally in that way. Legal challenges can take a significant amount of time, attention, and financial resources. They often require long discussions, preparation meetings, and review of complex information. It can also be emotionally exhausting to face repeated criticism and constant public evaluation. No matter how confident someone is, the weight of continuous legal challenges is not small. It affects daily routines and future planning. The environment outside the courthouse also showed how important these moments had become. On some days, small groups of supporters would gather, holding signs expressing encouragement. On other days, critics would gather, expressing their views as well. Reporters stood in designated areas, carefully watching for statements. Camera people kept their equipment ready at all times, waiting to capture reactions or expressions that could be shared on television. Every gesture and sentence seemed to hold meaning. Inside the legal process itself, judges maintained a serious and professional tone. Their job was not to react to media coverage or public discussion. Their focus was on documents, legal arguments, evidence, and courtroom rules. Judges often reminded both sides to speak clearly, provide support for their claims, and remain respectful in their communication. The goal of the court was fairness, and that fairness required structure and discipline. Trump's legal team developed strategies for each case. Some arguments focused on legal interpretations, some focused on constitutional questions, some focused on how previous cases were handled. Every case required careful planning. Trump was often present for important hearings. In those moments, the courtroom atmosphere was quiet and formal. People spoke slowly and clearly. No part of the process moved quickly. Legal proceedings are often slow, with many small steps leading to larger decisions later. As the months continued, the number of news articles, interviews, and discussions surrounding Trump's legal situation only increased. People talked about it at work, at home, on social media, and in classrooms. Some felt strongly that the legal system needed to finish its work. Others felt strongly that Trump was being treated unfairly. Very few people felt neutral. The situation had become something more than a legal matter. It had become a symbol of differences in how people saw fairness, leadership, responsibility, and power. This period created a feeling of anticipation. Everyone knew that important decisions would eventually be made. Some decisions might happen soon. Others might take months or even years. The legal system moves carefully, step by step, to avoid mistakes. But the world watching outside moved fast, reacting to each update immediately. Through all of this, Trump continued to be a central figure in American public life. He remained influential. People listened to what he said. His presence continued to shape conversations across the country. Whether someone viewed him positively or negatively, there was no doubt that his legal challenges were part of a larger story that many people felt emotionally connected to. The pressure had built, slowly but clearly, and now the next steps in the courtroom would hold even greater importance. Everyone watching understood that the coming hearings would not only affect Trump personally, but would also influence public opinion, political decisions, and national discussion. The stage was set for the next chapter. The day of the important court hearing arrived quietly, yet the atmosphere around it felt heavy. People had been talking about this date for several days. News stations had been announcing it in advance. Analysts had been discussing what might happen, and supporters and critics had expressed strong hopes for the outcome. Even though not everyone would be in the courtroom, many felt emotionally connected to what was about to take place. It was one of those moments where the country seemed to pause and watch. The morning started early. Outside the courthouse, the sidewalks were lined with reporters and camera crews. Some had arrived before sunrise, setting up their equipment while the sky was still dim. Journalists held notebooks, microphones, and tablets ready to share updates as soon as anything happened. Some stood calmly reviewing notes while others spoke live on air, explaining the background of the case and the importance of the day's hearing. Everyone wanted to be prepared to report the moment Trump arrived. There were metal barriers placed along the entrance to create space for movement and safety. Police officers stood near the doors, maintaining a careful and respectful presence. They were there to make sure everything stayed orderly, not to draw attention to themselves. Near the barriers, a few small groups of people gathered. Some held signs with messages of support for Trump. Others held signs expressing criticism. Neither group was large, and most people stood quietly, simply observing the scene. The mood was not loud or chaotic. It was steady, serious, and watchful. Inside the courthouse, the hallways felt calm but focused. Court buildings always carry a certain silence, especially on days of important hearings. The walls were lined with framed photographs and official notices. People walked slowly, speaking in low voices. Lawyers, staff members, and court officials moved purposefully, aware of the significance of the day but maintaining the professionalism their jobs required. Everyone understood that the courtroom was a place where emotions needed to stay controlled and respectful. Trump arrived at the courthouse surrounded by his legal team. His expression was calm and composed. He walked steadily through the halls, aware of the cameras but not reacting to them. His pace was neither rushed nor slow. It was the measured walk of someone who had been in high-stakes public situations many times before. His attorneys walked close by, carrying files, folders, and digital tablets filled with notes and documents to be used in the hearing. When he entered the courtroom, people were already seated. Courtroom seating is arranged in clear, organized rows, with benches for observers and special tables for the legal teams. The judge's bench stood at the front, raised slightly above the rest of the room. The judge entered shortly after, and everyone rose from their seats in respect. Once the judge was seated, the courtroom returned to silence. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was different from the one outside. There were no cameras inside, no reporters speaking into microphones, no shouted comments from observers. Instead, there was quiet focus. Every sound seemed to matter. Pages of documents being turned could be heard clearly. Pens tapping lightly against paper could be noticed. When someone spoke, their voice was the only sound in the room. The judge began by reviewing the purpose of the day's hearing. The words were spoken slowly and carefully. Judges take great care to remain neutral, using language that is balanced and clear. The judge explained the legal questions at hand, the motions to be discussed, and the procedures that would be followed. Both legal teams listened intently. Trump's legal team was the first to speak. The attorney stood and respectfully addressed the court. The attorney explained their position, referring to earlier documents and legal rules. The tone was steady and professional. There were no raised voices or emotional statements. Instead, the attorney described why they believed certain decisions should be made in Trump's favor. They pointed to evidence, timelines, and legal interpretations that supported their argument. They used precise, structured sentences, the kind of language trained lawyers spend years learning to use. The opposing legal team responded with equal formality. They stood and explained their perspective step by step. They provided documents of their own, statements that they believed contradicted some of Trump's legal team's claims, and reasons why the court should not grant the request that Trump's lawyers were making. They spoke respectfully, focusing on the structure of the law, not personal remarks. The courtroom continued to remain quiet except for their voices. At certain moments, the judge asked questions. These questions were clear and direct. They were not emotional or argumentative. Instead, they were designed to understand the reasoning of each side. The judge wanted to know the foundation of each argument, the exact meaning of each claim, and how each request fit into the broader legal rules. A good judge always seeks clarity and fairness, and this judge followed that principle carefully. When asked a question, the attorneys responded thoughtfully. They took a moment to gather their thoughts before speaking. Their answers needed to be precise because every word spoken in a courtroom carries weight. The legal meaning of a sentence can influence the direction of the case, so speaking slowly and clearly was important. Trump sat quietly during most of the hearing. His expression remained controlled. He looked toward the speakers, the judge, and sometimes the documents on the table before him. He did not interrupt or whisper loudly. His attorneys occasionally leaned toward him to share short comments or updates, but all communication remained subtle and respectful to the setting. Courtrooms require a certain discipline, and everyone in the room followed it. As the hearing continued, the discussion grew more detailed. Both sides referred to earlier court cases to support their arguments. They quoted past decisions made by judges in similar situations. This is a common part of legal practice. Lawyers often use the history of the law to support their current case. The judge listened carefully, sometimes taking notes, sometimes pausing for a moment in thought. Though the tone was quiet, the moment carried a sense of seriousness. Everyone in the courtroom understood that the decisions made today could influence later stages of the case. Even though no final decision might be made on that day, the steps taken in this hearing would shape the direction of the future. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited for updates. Each time the courtroom took a short break, lawyers or spokespeople stepped out to provide brief, careful statements. They spoke politely and avoided dramatic language. They explained that they respected the legal process and that they would continue presenting their arguments. Reporters listened closely, but the lawyers did not reveal more than they needed to. Legal strategy is often protected and planned quietly. The hearing lasted several hours. Some parts moved slowly because legal discussions can require careful detail. Other parts moved more quickly when both sides agreed on small points. The judge maintained control of the process, guiding the discussion forward at a steady pace. In the final moments of the session, The judge provided instructions about what would happen next. The judge explained timelines, documents that needed to be submitted, and the schedule for future steps. The judge spoke clearly to avoid any misunderstanding. Both legal teams listened closely and wrote notes to prepare for what they needed to do. When the hearing ended, everyone stood once more as the judge left the room. The courtroom slowly began to move again. Lawyers gathered their papers. Observers began to stand. People filed out through the doors quietly. Trump and his team walked out together, maintaining the same composed presence as when they entered. Outside, the atmosphere changed again. Reporters quickly asked questions. Cameras clicked. Journalists spoke live on air, summarizing what had taken place inside. However, because there were no dramatic exchanges or emotional outbursts inside, the summaries focused on the legal arguments and what the next steps in the case would be. Trump did not make a long speech as he left. He offered a few short comments, repeating his belief in his position and confidence in the legal process. His tone remained steady. His supporters welcomed his words, while his critics continued to interpret the situation differently. The public conversation continued just as it had before, but now with new details from the hearing added to the discussion. The day ended not with loud conclusions, but with quiet reflection. The courtroom had done its work. The legal process had moved another step forward, and the nation continued to watch, wait, and wonder what would come next. The ruling did not come immediately. Court decisions usually require time for the judge to review all documents, arguments, and legal standards. However, everyone knew the ruling would arrive soon. Journalists, supporters, critics, and legal analysts waited closely. Even though the courtroom had been calm and formal, the world outside continued to watch closely, ready for the next development. When the decision was finally released, it was presented in the form of a written statement from the court. The language in the ruling was clear, measured, and careful. Judges do not write emotionally. They explain step by step how they reached their conclusion. The document reviewed the evidence, the motions presented, and the laws that applied. It described why certain requests were approved or denied. It laid out the reasoning professionally, focusing only on legal standards. The key part of the ruling did not support Trump's legal team's request. The judge decided that the case would continue forward, and certain arguments that Trump's team hoped would delay or dismiss part of the case were not accepted. For Trump's legal team, this was a setback. It did not end the case and it did not determine the final outcome, but it did shape the direction of what would happen next. It meant more hearings, more documents, and more preparation. The news spread quickly. Within minutes, reporters posted updates online. Television channels switched to breaking news coverage. Analysts appeared to explain what the decision meant. Some spoke in calm, analytical tones, discussing the legal reasoning. Others spoke with more emotional energy, depending on their own opinions about Trump and the situation. Supporters of Trump reacted with disappointment, but not surprise. Many of them had already believed that the legal process was influenced by broader political feelings. On social media, individuals expressed concern that the decision felt unfair. They encouraged one another to stay positive and to believe that future stages of the case would allow Trump's team to present stronger arguments. They spoke about remaining hopeful and patient, trusting that more steps remained before any final outcome. Critics of Trump viewed the decision differently. They saw it as a sign that the evidence and legal reasoning were strong enough to continue forward. They described the decision as a step toward clarity and accountability. They spoke about the importance of allowing the legal system to complete its process fully. Their tone was not celebratory but determined. They believed that the legal system was working as it should. Meanwhile, Trump remained calm in public statements. When he addressed the ruling, he spoke in a steady tone, expressing that he respected the legal process but disagreed with the decision. He explained that his legal team would continue to work hard and would present strong arguments in the next stages of the case. He emphasized confidence in the appeals and future hearings. His words were chosen carefully, aiming to reassure supporters and maintain a composed public image. Inside his legal team, however, the ruling meant adjustments. Lawyers began reviewing the judge's reasoning in detail. They read each section of the decision, discussing how to approach the next phase. Legal teams often work long hours during times like this, examining every sentence, preparing new motions, and reviewing evidence again. They would need to consider whether to file an appeal, request reconsideration, or simply plan more strongly for the next court date. Legal strategy is not something decided quickly. It requires reflection and careful planning. The result also affected the tone of future hearings. Once a judge makes a decision that guides the direction of the case, both sides adjust their expectations. Trump's legal team now understood that they would need to strengthen certain arguments and gather more specific support for their claims. The opposing legal team understood that they would need to continue presenting information clearly and carefully to maintain the judge's confidence in their reasoning. The court's decision created a new foundation for how the case would move forward. In the public space, conversations grew louder. Talk shows, online forums, and community discussions reflected the same division that had existed before. Some people believed the decision was correct and fair. Others believed the decision was influenced by broader public attitudes. Few people changed their minds because of the ruling. Instead, it confirmed the beliefs they already held. However, there was something different now. The situation felt more real, more concrete. When a case is still in early stages, everything feels uncertain. But once a court issues a significant ruling, the seriousness of the legal process becomes clearer. People began to realize that the next steps in the case could carry long-lasting effects. The hearing, once seen as one event among many, now seemed like a turning point. Trump's schedule also had to accommodate the increased legal demands. Court dates, attorney meetings, document reviews, and discussions about future strategy required time. However, Trump continued his public appearances. He spoke at events, gave interviews, and engaged with his supporters. His ability to remain active in public life even while facing legal pressures was something many people noted. It showed his resilience and his commitment to his public role. For some observers, this moment highlighted the complexity of balancing public leadership and legal responsibility. It raised questions about how society views former leaders, how legal systems hold individuals accountable, and how public opinion influences these processes. Teachers discussed the situation in classrooms. Analysts wrote articles explaining legal history, and everyday people talked about the meaning of fairness in modern society. The judge's ruling did not claim guilt or innocence. It simply stated that the case should continue, and that certain legal objections did not meet the standards required to be accepted. Yet the impact was large because it shaped expectations of what would come next. The case had moved from possibility to a clearer pathway forward. Even though the ruling brought pressure, it also brought clarity. Trump and his legal team knew what they needed to do. Supporters understood that patience was necessary. Critics understood that the legal process would continue step by step, not through sudden dramatic moments. The national conversation continued through the evening and into the next day. Headlines discussed the significance of the ruling. Analysts offered predictions about the next steps. But the legal process itself remained steady, structured, and patient. Behind all of this, the courthouse remained the same building where calm procedures took place. The same wooden benches, the same judge's chair, the same quiet hallways. The law moved forward quietly, even while the world outside reacted loudly. The ruling was not the end. It was the beginning of a new stage. The next hearing would be more important. More documents would be presented. More arguments would be made. And once again, the country would watch closely. The story continued, steady and serious, step by step.